mine's pretty light anyway. I'm going to be pretty quick, but
Okay.
all the people here know me very well. So if I muck this up, it's not really a problem. Apart from Greg, I don't think I've spoken to you that much. But
So welcome everybody. Let's start. Off you go, Greg.
Well, unless you want to do the intro, Jules.
No,
So
I've done the intro now.
You've done it. Is that it?
That's it.
That
That's the intro.
Hello, everyone. We're starting. Genius.
Yeah.
Oh, Ian's turned it up. There we go. Fine.
Oh, there we go.
Right. Let's kick off then. So I will start with the news. Let me share the screen, and you should be able to see the news. Hello, Ian. Right. Fingers crossed. You will be able to see this, hopefully, which just says news. So, as per usual, I must give the credit totally to Penny, who has prepared this wonderful list of stuff for me, which I basically read about 10 minutes before the session started. But so I apologise if I'm a bit thin on the detail on this one, but I normally have more time to read it. But as I said earlier before we started, it's been a busy day. I've had a lot to do. So, but I've got all the information in front of me, so I think it should be informative enough. Obviously, FileMaker's done an update. 2102 has come out. The details are on the screen of what's on the screen. That's the obvious one. The thing I want to highlight everyone's attention to, and I say this mainly to the developers out there, which you all are, is because you will have clients who don't want to upgrade, or they want to upgrade to the latest version of FileMaker, but don't want to upgrade the 12-year-old Mac Mini it's running on. And the problem you'll face is that really important note at the bottom, which is if you are running Monterey, they are going to put something in there that you will not be able to use the latest version. You won't even install it. So it will detect for Monterey and then stop it from installing. So you won't be able to take it to the latest version. So that's the most important thing, that if you've got any clients out there running old versions of OS, you're going to encounter a problem. They're just following the standard methodology of what FileMaker are teaming up basically with Apple. Monterey is not supported come November anyhow. So it's not a supported OS. It won't get security updates. So it will become obsolete, and they're just not going to allow the installer to run. So there are some features in here, and there's some updates. As I said, they're in there. As always, the links I will share with Joel via the chat, and then we'll share the chat on after the event. So
I can confirm from ETS that is indeed true. It's not just, oh, it will happen. It's a bit like when you had like a System 9 app and it's just got a big X through it going, nah, just you can't run it, which stops all the people on the forums going, oh, I've got a problem because I'm running FileMaker 16 on Sonoma. It doesn't work properly. It does remove support calls as well, but I can confirm that is absolutely true. Just won't install.
Good. So they've put something in that it will install and not function, or not even install.
No,
because according to that, it won't even install. Yeah, it just goes, no, you can't install this app. That's right. Yeah.
Computer says no.
So so it's something to bear in mind.
Good thing, I think.
Say that again.
I think that's probably a good thing, actually.
I think it is as well. I think it is because it'll make people upgrade. So.
Yeah.
And if you're asking for the later features, really, you should be running the more secure later operating system. So that makes perfect sense to me. On window transaction, this is something that I know Penny has been looking at. We're looking at how this works. There was an article on Saline about moving payloads of the transaction. So when someone changes something in a window, you can then create a payload and commit a process and then create a log. It's been in FileMaker for a little while. There's an article on Saline about how the payload works, best practices for using it, because you can break your system if your payload's too big, but it's best practices, and it's a worthwhile read if you're using this functionality. I'm not saying that everyone is yet, but if you've got anything out there that is using the on-window transaction process, then I would urge you to read this. It's certainly something we are starting to look at writing within some of our solutions, because it will make life a lot easier and simpler. So I know Penny and Ben are looking at that at the moment, and it's something that we're following. If anyone wants to pass comment, please do on this. It's not something that I've used, but I don't know whether you guys have.
I looked at that a while ago. as a method of synchronization for different databases. So I don't have the link immediately handy, but I think I did a blog post about it to basically show how to synchronize to an external SQL database. And when I did that, actually, Fabrice said, I've got somebody to show you before, and that was in Berlin. And he basically, what he's done is he's got something that will use that as a method of synchronizing between FileMaker servers. So it's quite a powerful function.
Yeah. So yeah, I would if you're certainly trying to work that way. Well, for us, we're trying to look at it from that point of transactional change. So we on our online system, as we're changing a process, we're making calls to third-party web systems and so forth. So we want to make sure everything stays in sync. So that's the reason why the team are starting to look at this. They want to actually replicate it. So if you have a crash, you've got the transactional log that you can not roll back from, but you know where you are within a process, and you can rebuild the table to get it back to the right state. So it's one of the things we're looking at from our point of view. That's the user case that we're looking at. Next up was revert the transaction. So on the transaction, the process of creating transactions through FileMaker, in that respect, there was 2 articles about the point that if you did revert a transaction, would it work within supported subscripts? It's now been reported that now will work across subscripts. So if you do revert a transaction, not in the main script only, it will cascade through to the subscript. The 2 articles here, Cris did a little article saying it will work, and here's the details. Prof Geist basically did a really detailed breakdown of how to use it, best practices again, how the supported subscripts are going to function. Even in their article, they even had a couple of areas where it's just like food for thought, and think about areas where it could cause problems, and you could have issues where it doesn't revert completely across the stack of the call. But both articles are there. Again, if you're using that functionality, it's worth looking at, but now it is supported in subscripts, which is useful. Next on the list was file summaries to JSON. So this is an article that's been going on FileMaker Hacks for a little while now, but they've just produced a part 2, which came out literally about a week ago. But it sparked our interest because it's that point of, at the moment, I create summaries and bits and pieces through using Click for the data to then generate a summary, and it generates the file back within seconds and no problems at all. I don't want to take something out of FileMaker if I don't need to, but the article here is really, really useful because it gives you an idea of where we're going with this. Is the initial way of you'd normally create a summary for an array and so forth. It takes about 3,000 milliseconds. Basically, the article has got 4 demo files you can download. You can run this yourself on your own architecture and test how it works. But if you're creating an array of data to create a summary on their sample data, it was taking about 3,000 milliseconds to process that. The little trick when they go through the process of how to do this using the JSON make array and insert calculated result, they get that 3,000 milliseconds down to 250. So it's a marked increase in speed. And the thing I found amazing with this is in the part 2 of it, they've got a way as well of, if you're running this on FileMaker 16 and above, bearing in mind you don't have the JSON make array, they've got a thing where they substitute a different function and it still manages to run nearly as fast, which I thought was quite clever. They play around with the scripting in there, how to pass off data between one handle and the next handle. So if you're creating summary data, we suffer with it a lot. Some of the stuff I'm working on, I'm trying to summarize millions of rows of records that are in FileMaker, and it's just not the tool for it. So I normally bring the data out, put it somewhere else, summarize it, bring it back as just a flat file. You can use SQL to do that or other bits and pieces, but it's worth a read. If it meets your requirement, you don't have other tools. I'm lucky enough I've got other tools, but some people don't, and FileMaker is the only tool you've got in your bag. It's worth a read.
I read an interesting old post by Josh Willinghalpen about how FileMaker scripts handle JSON functions. And one of the things, so if you do a set a JSON object And what you do in that is read the value from another JSON object. FileMaker has to basically dump one of them, load the other one up so it can parse it to find it, and then reload the other one. Because it's not holding it as an object. While it is a text string that looks like JSON, it can only handle it by parsing the text. So it can't hold the two things in memory at one time. Which is, so that is sped up by use the insert calculated result rather than set variable because of how it handles it. But if you're using anything with JSON where you got incoming JSON, then the quickest thing is to set a list of variables to the queries that you want to do in the first piece of JSON before you start touching another JSON object, because that will make it a lot quicker. I'm going to, for the next meeting, I'll find the link, and it's quite old, but I'm going to ask Josh for some more detail because I think that would be worth sharing.
Kevin's most recent thing does reference that technique because I think it's relating to how the JSON is cached. And like you say, only one item is cached.
Yeah.
So in Kevin's blog post, he does make reference to what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Not because you're here, Ian, but as I said at the start of this, Penny does the list of the news for me, and she featured your article that came on Medium, which is basically semantic search. So we featured it here. You mentioned it here, and you ran over it. It's on our back catalogue of videos. But the guys basically were reading this, going through this, and we're looking at where we can use the methodologies and the approach. So it's, if you're using the new version of FileMaker, you've got these functions, these features available to you. So it's worth a read. And I'm not plugging that just because Ian's here. So this was curated before I even knew you were attending, sir.
Can you put those links into the chat?
I will do, yes. I will post all the links into the chat after I've finished, John. No worries.
Thank you.
Dates for the diary is the other thing I wanted to mention. So these are all the dates that are coming up. The one thing I wanted to highlight based on what we had in the last event, which Joel mentioned about .fmp Berlin event not being around anymore, but there are files still available online for recent .fmp Berlin sessions and processes and files and sample files. You can find them online. So if you haven't got content and you go over something and someone says, oh, that was at some session there, I know the event's no more, which is sad, but there are still files available, so you can download those and find them. But they're the events that are available that are coming up. And everyone keeps talking about Engage EU being an event that everyone should go to. I really hope I can free up my time and try and attend, because it's the one I really want to go to, but I don't know whether I'm going to have the time to do it this year. So, but the consensus is definitely the event to try and attend if you can. Bearing in mind on we're this side of the pond, anyone that's in the US at the moment, I'm aware you've got the main event that you've got from FileMaker, but for us to travel over the pond sometimes is costly and time consuming. So, but just let you know.
Well, actually, I was going to say that Engage EU is longer and has more sessions than the one in the States, so probably be better in many ways.
I can't comment on either. So, but if you've been to both, I take your view on it, Ian. So thank you.
I did an email conversation with Johan the other week, about 10 days ago, and he'd like to try and find a way to access more UK developers to get them to come. He's not sure he's got enough, enough people on a mailing list to kind of go, can you come, versus people who know that, but like Gary are still not decided. If people know any contacts, UK contacts, then I think Johan would appreciate a quick email going, why don't you talk to this person, this person? I think he'd just love, I mean, clearly they want the event to be a success in terms of numbers, but he's also keen that we have a good representation from the UK community.
I can confirm. Yeah. He said that to me a while ago, John, as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
I had a chat with Katja, who basically said much the same to me, but yeah.
Okay.
Well, and
we're all here, so put the word out. So
the other thing, Gary, is that the .fmp is going to be replaced by an event at a very similar time in Vienna. So two of the guys who were frequently there are taking on the mantle of, I think it's called Welcome Vienna or something like that. While we're on, I'll find the link to it. So basically, .fmp, but not in Berlin, a different but similar thing, but in Vienna, beginning of June.
Cool. You heard it here first. There you go. Cheers, John. Thank you. Obviously, the virtual bar will be after. I don't know how, whether I'll be there, but it's always there, and it runs after the recording stops. So, and I'm trying to look at the schedule. It's still
schedule says you're onto a video next. I didn't know how
it's
long
still to me. It's still me. So that's the news. So that's fine. Fair enough.
Chris is here. I've seen him join. So welcome, Chris.
He's here.
Hey,
don't worry, Chris. I will not keep you waiting. This will be quick.
No sweat. Anytime.
So one of the things I was looking at, and we are constantly looking at in what we do in our warehousing, is ways to scan things quicker and do things smarter. RFID scanning is always one thing we look at. For our material, it's very hard to do. We sell comics, and you can't stick a sticker on a comic. They won't let you, because the collectors won't buy it if you touch it in any way, apart from wearing gloves. So they are a very collective bunch of people. So we struggle with this. But I was talking to Jordan Watson about something, and he was doing something with one of his clients, which was basically, I believe it was Team GB for the Olympics, and he was trying to find a way of scanning stuff, and he partnered up with I can't remember who it was. I think it was Data Logic, and they were doing RFID scanning. So they agreed to do all of the material. So if you're not aware of what RFID scanning is, some of you will, some of you won't. It's basically an ID tag which has got a chip in it, and it responds when a scanner passes over it. Now, the field of view of that could be anything from 3 to 4 feet to 100, 200 feet. You can go to silly sort of size scanners depending on what antennas you put on them. But the benefit is you can scan hundreds of items very, very fast. So Jordan went into his warehouse doing this and was playing around with it, and he was fortunate enough to send me the video. And I've seen RFID scanning before, but nothing of this sort of size and scale. And it just blew my mind of where it was going. So I've got the video here. I'm just going to play the video, and then I'll talk about what happened afterwards and the technology that was behind this and how this can read into FileMaker, because this was all reading into FileMaker after it scanned. So it was bringing all the data back into FileMaker to then do like an inventory of what they had on the floor back into FileMaker. So I'm going to play the video. Hopefully you can hear it. Fingers crossed you can. I don't know that you will hear it, but I'll give it a go. So hopefully you will.
Got no sound, Gary.
That's right. I'll talk over it. So basically, the scanning's there, and the one thing I want to do is just pause it, if I can pause it, which I can't typically. So if I go here and pause it, to give you an idea what that's doing, it's basically, it was going through the scans, and what Data Logic have written is what it does is every RFID's got a unique ID. It goes over that scan, and it doesn't matter if it gets a duplicate scan at all. And the idea is you want it to get a duplicate scan. You want it to scan an RFID chip probably 3 to 6 times. And the idea of that is it just makes sure that every chip has answered. So what it did is that scanner in that space of about 8-9 seconds scanned 3,700 items without even getting close to them. It just went through the entire width of the warehouse and just said, that's it. And as it was going down, it was going up in hundreds to hundreds. Or what he's actually got at the bottom is the software now. And this is something that I know Jordan was talking to Data Logic, how they're going to do that. it dedupes that to 774 actual items were scanned and the quantities against each one of those items. So in those bins were thousands of t-shirts for Team GB, and he was just going over it and scanning every single size, every single color, every single design, because every single label was given an RFID chip. He had 100% accuracy that they knew exactly what was in that warehouse. So the idea is they scanned a whole warehouse. It took about 15, 20 minutes to inventory a whole warehouse, which is mind-blowing and exceptionally cool. The only concern is you need to have everything RFID'd for that to work. So it depends whether it meets your business requirement and you can do it. The advantage of this, I think they were partnered up with Adidas. So they went to Adidas and said, can you make sure every single label is an RFID tag? And they said, yes, no problems at all. So just to give you an idea.
How large are the RFID tags? Sorry, this is Beatrice. This is my first meeting. You still live in Brighton. Pleasure to meet you.
Hi, Beatrice. Hi. The RFID tag is exactly the same as a tag label you would find on a clothing label. It's like a thin piece of paper. It's less than probably a postage stamp. It's tiny.
Thank you.
You can get them in all different sizes. There's hundreds available. You can even get RFID tags that you can stitch into clothing. So they can come as material that you can put in the clothing on the logo. So and we've had Honza do some stuff for us in the past where he's gone through this. But yeah, if you research RFID tags, you'll find them on all shapes and sizes. To program them is not problematic at all either. You just need a little, basically the gun can program hundreds of them instantly. If you wave over all empty RFID tags, you can index them and calculate them. So you could literally have a box of RFID tags, scan the gun over it, and it'll then index every tag because it knows the IDs. And then you just attach those IDs to a record in your database. And then that's it. That's a unique one-to-one. It's used an awful lot in the clothing industry, but we're trying to look at it where we can use it within what we do. But I just wanted to show the video because it just, I'd yet to see something function at that sort of speed from just a handheld scanner. And it blew my mind. I'm trying to work out how I can use it. But it was pretty cool. And that's the news and my little snippet bit, and I will happily pass the baton over to Cris. So over to you, sir.
It's pretty cool.
Just before you do that, quickly, Beatrice, I just sent you a message in the chat about local FMBug as well. So over to you, Cris. Thank you very much.
Great, of course. And I will share. Oh,
Can you share? Can you share? I'm just checking that. So.
Let's see. It says host disabled.
Hold on.
Host disabled, participant sharing screen. There we
Should
go.
be fine.
All right.
Fine now.
Good to go. All right. Yes. Rocking and rolling. Okay. Well, hello, friends. Good evening.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes. Okay. Excellent. So, joining you from Southern California, my name is Cris Ippolite. I am a trainer and a fellow developer like everyone here, based out of Southern California. That's where I'm chiming in from here this morning. We're in the middle of a heat wave. So I'm going to see how many pounds I can lose in this non-air conditioned recording booth that we're in here today. I kid, but I guess it's notable that we're having a heat wave out here. But anyways, I wanted to chat with all of you about, well, so there's a lot of discussion. This is me. Let me advance past all this. Boring. There's a lot of discussion about semantic search going on in the FileMaker community, as there should be, because of course they just announced the this past year the support for FileMaker 21, otherwise sometimes referred to as FileMaker 2024's support for embeddings or semantic search, and maybe you've even heard the term vectors in there. I'm not going to go really deep into vectors embeddings because I'm sure you've heard it before. You've had other presentations or other discussions about this. I want to go into some of the use cases beyond semantic search. That's really what the primary focus of these features have been thus far, but I just wanted to hopefully inspire folks to, with some out of the box type ideas. But first, just a very quick flyover on vectors and embeddings in case, in fact, those terms are ones you're not yet familiar with. There is a process that creates these things called vectors, or the vector representation of your data is another way to think about it. And you can think of the verb for creating those as embedding, but the embeddings are also often the product of that process. But for the sake of this discussion here, we'll talk about vectors being a representation of text that is a mathematical representation of text, and the process that we go through is we embed text in order to create those vectors. So for what I'm going to show you here, that much level of vocabulary should suffice. And just to add a little bit more color there, the process that creates the vectors is called embeddings, and this involves using specially trained language models. So we hear a lot about language models, but it may not be so obvious that there's a type of language model that is called an embeddings model, which helps us do these tasks. And the task that I'm talking about is that we translate words, which us humans understand, into numbers that machine learning models can understand, or language models in this case as well. And while translating, this process captures very important meaning from those words and conveys those as numbers. So the purpose of doing this is to mathematically determine how similar our words, phrases, or chunks of text are to each other. And the important takeaway here is that when we turn the words into numbers, similar concepts within the text that we're embedding can have mathematical similarity that can be measured. And we refer to those as distances. The closer the distance, the more similar a word, phrase, or chunk of text are. So calculating those distances is how we mathematically determine how semantically similar words or phrases are to each other. And you may have seen this, and there's and just as a quick public service announcements, there are a couple of embedding models or a couple sources of models that are supported within FileMaker. Keep in mind though that there are tons of embedding models, and I'm gonna try to mention the models that were used in some of these examples, because you can there's a lot of choices to be made. You notice here this is something that's called the MTEB leaderboard, which you can find on Hugging Face. You see the URL up on the top right hand corner of my screen, and keep in mind that the embedding dimensions can be referred to as its capabilities. I don't know, loosely referred to as its capabilities. So it's something that you pay attention to. You don't always need the most dimensions. You just need to find something that has a good combination of the least amount of dimensions to actually perform the task, with the lowest amount of memory usage as well too, especially if you're running these locally on your machine. Something that you see here in the double digits just won't work, frankly. So anyways, just some decisions to make, but really I just wanted to talk a little bit about what can we do besides search. But before I do that, what is this search thing that I'm talking about? Well, this is a FileMaker 21 file that has semantic search set up. You see, we've got 101 meeting records, and each one of these meetings has a meeting description or a note that describes what occurred in the meeting. And I'm going to put a search term in here. This little field that you see is a search field. And when I execute the script, it has come back with 10 matching meeting notes. So what I actually did a search for is could be thought of as I searched the meaning and to see if there's anything similar to the phrase that I just put, which is operational efficiency and performance improvements, which, by the way, even though you can see the word efficiency on here, none of the words operational efficiency, performance, or improvements need to be in the resulting meeting notes that I'm searching in order for there to be a match. And that is really the key to why semantic search is so much more meaningful. What the type of search we're all used to, which can be referred to as lexical search or index or keyword-based searches, needs to have the actual words matching there. So the index of the field needs to have the field that we're searching on in order for there to be a match. In this case, it's more conceptual. So you'll notice here, if you see, I've highlighted some of the words here in red as I go through a couple of these. These are matches for operational efficiency or performance. Well, actually, it has to have the existence of both, I should say. I need to find meetings where there was a discussion about the concepts of operational efficiency or also the concepts of performance improvements. You see that here: goal of improving tracking of stock levels and automating reorder process. And then, of course, the performance improvements, in this case, benefits of improved inventory management. You see a couple of different ones here. And this idea, while that's not the purpose of my presentation, is something that I think everyone should really become very familiar with, because this is very important, and I think will have an impact. Literally any single database that is storing data, especially like long form textual data like this, can benefit from the semantic search. So in a distant issue, what I really wanted to talk about is kind of do a flyover on what is some of the other stuff that we can do with semantic search. Well, first of all, I won't be talking about chatbots, but I'm just showing you a chatbot, because if any of you have, worked with the, the ChatGPTs or the Claudes of the world, or maybe a chatbot like this one here that was custom built for a certain domain, though these are all leveraging semantic search. What it's actually doing is it's through the process of embedding, it's vectorizing the question that the user puts in the bottom, and then it is going, and in this case, this is a document retrieval. So what it's doing is it's you take a bunch of documents, you go through the embedding process and create vector representations of those documents, and you store them in something called a vector database. And then the user types in their question down here below, which I'll just run that real quick. So this little question: provide details on requirements for the location of fire hydrants, blah, 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 blah. That gets embedded on the fly. And then we do a similarity. We literally mathematically determine how close the question is to any of the answers that are in this vector database. We present the closest or the best matches to those from a similarity standpoint in our chatbot. So you've probably already seen these things, but I'm going to do a quick flyover on some not so obvious use cases. Like, for example, translation. We all know language models can do translation. Do they do translation well? Well, that's another topic, but it might be of interest to know that the term, for example, in English, this is red, and the term in Spanish, esto es rojo, forgive my terrible accent there in pronunciation, those, even though they're the same statement but in different languages, also have similarities. So if you use a multilingual embedding model, you can actually determine the accuracy of a translation. So for example, here you'll notice that this is red and esto es rojo are 92% similar. That's not really an accurate way to look at it, but I think if you're new to this, you can look at these as 92%. What it really means is the mathematical representation, or the mathematical similarity score, so to speak, that we got back is really a 0.92 in this particular algorithm that's being used. So we can look at that as saying 92% similar. So instead of just blindly doing translations, you can leverage things like embeddings and comparing vectors to determine how accurate your translation was. So for example, this is a client of ours where we did a bunch of different, what we were doing is setting up a large scale translation system that was going to translate product descriptions for like 1 million plus different product SKUs that they had. So we wanted to figure out a way that we could rely on it being accurate. So what we did is we actually found human subject matter experts. This is called expert reinforcement or human reinforcement or humans in the loop. You might hear these terms bantered about. And what we did is we sent them a bunch of descriptions in English, and then in their languages that they understand, Spanish and or Portuguese, and we asked the human reviewers to give us a score. So like you see here, this is a 7, in the various different categories: overall, translation, context, technical consistency, and so on. So why would we do that? Well, what we're actually doing is we're then taking what the humans felt the score was. So we're looking for 10 is a great score, compared to what the semantic score or the 0.92, like I showed you in the previous script. And what we're able to do is calibrate those and essentially come up with, through this exercise of allowing humans to review it and then comparing it to those scores in the back end, we're able to then determine what the acceptable threshold would be, meaning anything above a 0.73, let's say, or 0.73 or higher would be an acceptable translation. So that way, then we can go into production and allow the language models to do the translations. But anytime they come back with something that has a similarity score of less than 0.73, we'll go back again and say, hey, this translation was not accurate. Try this again. And then we will then wait till we get one above the threshold and then feed that into the database for storage. So using vectors is a great way to actually determine the similarity between a phrase and its multilingual translation. Additionally, you can also do things depending on what type of model you use. You can determine the pairing of things like needs or solutions. In this case, this is actually an experiment that I did for one of our projects where We took like 10,000 statements that a customer was making about a product or service that they were looking for and compared it to a whole separate set of data where companies were given a tagline about the product or service that they offer. And we were determining the matches for those based on thresholds. So this is actually a 0.87 cosine similarity is the terminology in FileMaker. And you could also look at that as 87% similar or 87% of a match. But the not so obvious demonstration that I wanted to share with you here today is this one that we did in this matching job posting versus resume matching project. And so if we take a closer look at it, you can kind of think of matching job postings to applicant resumes as another interesting way to determine what a good match would be. Forgive me. What you're looking at on screen is a project that we created. This is a case study, which was a job resume AI matching project from one of our customers, where we actually used 3 different ways to match the data. And I thought it might be interesting to share that with everybody here today. So what we're looking at on screen is a PDF document of a resume, or no, of a job position. That's what you see on the left-hand side. The text that was extracted from the document right here. And then when we run the text through an embedding model and get vectors back, or when we do the verb of embedding, we get back all these numbers. These are vectors. And this is vectors stored in a text field, but in FileMaker, you can store these in a container field. So you wouldn't see these, but I thought it might be interesting for you to take a look at those. And so in this case, what we're doing is we're taking an entire document, the entire job position specification document, and the entire resume document, and seeing what cosine similarity those two have to try to see how useful that is in the job matching world. And what we ultimately found out, actually, you'll see here, now that I move over to the resumes, we do the same thing. You see the document on the left, the text in the middle, and then the vectors. And then that score up on the top there is the cosine similarity between the vectors of the resume and the vectors of the job position. This is just a brute force. You can see there it says 0.46. So it's basically saying this resume is a 46% match to the job. We found this to be a little noisy. Our highest similarity values that we were getting were probably in the low 60s, 0.6 and so on. And so we wanted to try something else that I thought was kind of interesting. This is called ontology mapping, where instead of extracting the text as one big block, like we did with the document on the previous one, we used a language model with some sophisticated prompting to extract these smaller individual sections from the job position text. So you see them in the middle here, responsibilities of the position, history of the position. So we used some logic that was guided by our customers to create these prompts to send the entire text of the document over to a language model and have it just define or extract and define each one of these 7 different sections. Then, as you would probably imagine, this one's a little bit different. We go over to the resumes. We give it the same breakdown of the resume text. This is a little odd because you're actually, this is pretty complicated, because we said to the language model, here's a resume, but we need you to extract from the resume a description of what the responsibilities of a position that this would be a good, they would be a good candidate for might be. So it's a little weird. It's a little bit of a twisted logic there, but ultimately what we ended up doing is being able to create the same matching 7 categories based on the resumes. Then what you're seeing on the right-hand side is, instead of having one of those scores that we call them, or cosine similarities, we now have 7 of those. And so the next step that we took from those is, instead of doing like an average of those, we went back into the job position and we did a weighting process. So those of you familiar with other kind of machine learning know that weighting is essentially just giving the user the ability to say which of these 7 sections is more important than the others. And all of these have to add up to 100. So you can see here that they made a decision that the quality and characteristics of the successful candidate were more important than, let's say, the history of the position. So when you do a weighting exercise, then you can create what's called a regression model. And you can do this with as a matter of fact, I probably have this very regression model open. Oh, well, I don't have it open. You can use CreateML if you're a Mac user, or if your constituents have at least one user that runs their system on Mac. You can create a Core ML regression model for that, topic for another day. But just to let you know, this particular customer runs on Mac, so we were able to create the regression formula that you see in the middle. That's just a notebook version of it, but we were able to create that in Core ML, and then they can run this in production. So as the users go into the different weighting activity, they then run this model to determine what the individual matches are with the 7 on the resume side and 7 on the job position side. And then instead of averaging the scores together, we apply the weights to them, and we come up with, in this case, what would be a 0.55 matching similarity. So that's an example of matching. So far we've talked about matching a full document with another full document, job positions and resumes. In this case, we're going to look at, and then what we just looked at was breaking those documents down into more minutia. And I can tell you that we had significantly less noise and more accuracy with our matching when we broke the data down. So not to say that breaking full documents or just trying to match on full documents is not a useful endeavor, but the more you can break it down, the more that you can compartmentalize your data and then do your matching. We found that to be the case here and in others as well too. And finally, the last little part of this was a third approach, which we call ideal mapping. And so what we did is we took every one of the job positions and we created a sophisticated prompt and sent it over to a language model to say, define what the ideal candidate for this job would look like. And it comes up with all this data was actually from it evaluating this position and coming up with the contents that you see in that text. And then, of course, we go over to the resume and we do what's called an ideal position. So what would be the ideal position for this resume? And then we, as you can imagine, we vectorize, or we run the text of the resume ideal position together with the job position ideal candidate, and then we do a matching score of those two, or a cosine similarity between those two. And what was really interesting about this is that we thought we were just going to give them 3 different ways, that 3 different things they can test. So we ran 3 different experiments for them and let them test it out on their own. But what we really discovered is that all 3 were useful to them in different stages of the workflow process. So it's not that it's just one of them was better than the others. They were able to use the long, document to document one to create a long list of candidates. And then some of these other ones show up later in their workflow process. So just to kind of get you thinking about that, and just to fly through a couple of other examples, just to kind of hopefully inspire you guys a little bit. This is an example of taking a trouble ticket and running the text from a trouble ticket through an embeddings process, and then trying to match it with, these are different categories of resolution. You see here, expired, cannot, whatever. So what we're actually able to, with a pretty high level of efficiency, act as the first step in evaluating trouble tickets to categorize them and send them over to the right department. You can kind of think of it as you got like level 1, level 2, level 3 support. We were able to create a level 1 support for these tickets that categorize them using the matching process that we've been just talking about here today, and then sending them over to the appropriate level 2 person. And that dramatically increased the efficiency of them being able to process all this information. This is an interesting use case too, where this is a customer that captures road signs with LiDAR cameras on top of vehicles, much like those Google cars, or maybe you've seen them in your own regions. And what they asked us to do was do image embeddings, which I'll cut to the chase and say just simply embedding the image raw and comparing it to other images. Raw was not very useful, but what we did instead is we took the image. This is a sample image that was captured from one of these LiDAR cameras, and we fed it into a vision model. So this would be like GPT-4V, the vision model, or any other language model that is referred to as multimodal, that accepts images as inputs. And you'll see we asked it for very specific things, and we asked it in JSON format. So for example, what's the text that you see in it? Describe it, tell us how many rows there were, what colors, what the background color is, the shape, and then define a narrative of that. And this was all based on a prompt template that we created. And the key is that because we use a certain type of a prompt template, and we were very descriptive in what we were looking for, it gives us back a consistent JSON object back that describes each one of the signs. Then we compare that to the same exercise that we did with the training materials. You see, we got like these animated training materials that we did the same description to. So essentially, we get these descriptions for the images on the intake and on the training set. And then, as you can imagine, we run the text that came out of those observations through the embedding process, then do the cosine similarity between the text descriptions of the images, thus providing image matching, but via a text description that was embedded and used as vectors. So kind of an not so obvious use case there for embedding. And I know that's kind of a quick and dirty, but I did want to leave at least 5 minutes for any questions that anybody had here. Just a couple of different ways to kind of think about different ways that you can leverage, not so obvious ways that you can leverage some of the embeddings that we've been hearing about and that we can now do natively within FileMaker. So as I take a breath, any questions on any of the stuff I've shown, I'm happy to dig in deeper.
That's amazing, Cris. Superb. Really good demo. And blown my mind. So,
well, thank you for that. And I guess the idea is, let's, satisfy our curiosities by working with the semantic search stuff. By the way, I should probably mention that sometime later this year, this file that I pulled here is actually the exercise file from an upcoming LinkedIn learning course that I should have out by the Christmas holiday, because I just want to get it over with before the Christmas holiday. That is specifically about all FileMaker's new AI script steps and calculation functions. And I just go step by step into one of the, this is the meeting starter solution, and just kind of walk you through how you integrate all of them and how you set these scripts up and what they all mean and how they all work. And so you might see this again, in addition to any of those of you that are here today or watching. I'll be doing a training day after Claris Engage here in the States, where we're doing a day-long primer session, and this is going to be these exercises will be the real meat of it there too. So anyways, you'll see this stuff again, but the point is, at the very least, check out what semantic search, adding semantic search capabilities to your existing FileMaker systems can add. I promise you, it's very little amount of work, but really pretty incredible. This specific example notwithstanding, pretty incredible things that you can do with it. Like, for example, that resume and job position matching is all capable through native, the native embeddings and searching tools that, and actually mostly the cosine similarity and the embeddings tools that we have available to us now on the platform.
Yeah, blown my mind too, Cris. It's really creative and fascinating and inspiring.
Love it. That's my primary goal. And all you need is a version of FileMaker 21 to make any of the things that I've shown you happen. But in the meantime, just start thinking about this stuff. Think about, what are some not so obvious, not so searchy type things that we can do. And remember, those chatbots that you all interact with, some of you maybe even as I'm talking right now, they are made possible through a not so obvious semantic search application in themselves. So hopefully, I frankly look forward to hearing from anybody that comes up with their own ideas about how this might work. If you are active on LinkedIn, you can look me up on LinkedIn under my name, Cris Ippolite. That's CRISIPPOLITE. And give me a follow. And if you ever have any questions, or more importantly, anything cool that you've done too, I'd love hearing from people. I like to get inspired myself. So please reach out to me there and let me know if you've come up with anything interesting. But in the meantime, if I have any more cool stuff that comes along, I'd be happy to come back and have another chat with you guys.
We'd love you back, Cris, because your talks are always fascinating. So yeah, please do. Let us know if you've got some other ideas you want to.
Absolutely. I will not be short about that. But thanks for having me, everybody. It's always fun to show up. Yeah, go ahead, John. I see your hand up there.
Well, the advantage of Cris doing a session is you get like 2 in the space of 1 because he speaks so fast.
I actually did a class once where a bunch of kids were in there and they're going, "Oh, we listened to all your LinkedIn courses on 2 times speed," and I'm like,
"What?"
I know exactly. How's that even possible? And I'll give you an AI pro tip before we get to your question, John, on speed. Some of these multimodal ones that can, like Gemini, we've been doing a lot of work with Gemini 1.5 Pro. We had a 5-hour video that we needed to transcribe, but we had like a token limitation on the size. So what we did is we actually sped up, just to kind of speak to this sort of cheeky comment that I just made there. We sped up to like 4x on the speed, which decreased it down to like 2 gigabytes from 4.5 gigabytes or something like that. And it still processed and picked up all the language in there. So a little pro tip on talking fast or speeding up there for you as a bonus.
That's excellent. So just in that one thing you just said though, Chris, there's clearly, I mean, I've seen loads of your presentations. I know that you have some deep-pocketed customers who are happy to pay you for all the benefits you bring them, but not all of our customers are in that space. What I'm interested in is where the balance of your work to get to that end point is, in terms of there's something that you have to do that's experimental that you kind of will be doing yourself. There's stuff that the customer understands you need to experiment with to see if this will even work with real documents like training, versus the actual writing of code. And roughly, where's the balance for the customer in terms of, before they even get a benefit, there's a lot of dev and cost and training and stuff to go in first.
No doubt. Well, and plus the compute and token costs, for example, the overhead to run these. Well, you nailed it. The word that you just used most in that question is really the biggest pro tip I can give. It's experiments, run experiments. And I only even have that terminology in my brain because prior to the language model boom, we were doing a lot of custom machine learning for our customers. And one of my colleagues here at iSolutions is like our resident data scientist. And he, made us start using the term experiments because he kept saying, we're like, oh, can you do this incredible like market basket thing for, this one enterprise customer with all their blah, blah, blah. And he goes, well, we can run an experiment to determine if we can. And I used to be a little deflated by that because, I'm in sales as well too. And I want to close the deal. But the reality of it is that has become my best friend, so to speak, is that concept of starting small, taking off little bites, because you have to, if your client's data is just terrible, there's not going to be a lot of stuff that you can do. So you have to be able to run a little experiment, even to just take a glance at how their data is structured. If you're fortunate enough to be the one who architected their data and their workflows and their infrastructure, and that data, that's probably not as useful to you as it is for us when we're looking at other people's data. But that's one important part of it. And then really just saying, what are some of the things you want to do? Give us 15 questions you might ask of this set of documents or this data set that you want to connect to. And then let's spin up a chat bot or something. Or in the case of these embeddings, what we did with these folks is we had them give us one job position and then like 5,000 resumes. And we just ran an experiment to see if it was useful in any of those cases. And that experiment is what made us realize, oh, the brute force document to document isn't as meaningful. So maybe we should try the 7 different sections or this ideal thing instead. And so that was born out of an experiment that only cost our customer like 20 or 30 hours of an investment, from a cost standpoint and also their time and some testing. But by the time we were done with it, as a development team, now we knew exactly what we needed to know is how much time it was actually going to cost us, what we would do, how we could actually bid this out, what the production environment would need to look like, and what the compute cost, the time overhead for embedding, and the token cost per document was going to be, so that our customers can now set an expectation for moving into production. So there's a laundry list of reasons why you should do things as a small, tiny little, purposely small and mitigated scope of an experiment before you jump in anything production. That's the biggest advice I can give. And that took me a solid couple of years to figure that out, actually.
It's really helpful. I mean, the question comes out of, I'm sure others may have had the same thing. A customer had seen the video in which Ronnie demonstrated, oh, you can have semantic search, do a thing and search for some data and bring you back a graph. And so his email to me was, well, can I have that in my system then? and the answer is, well, yes, at some point, but not tomorrow. Because
I think that's a fair answer, though. I think that's the right answer that a consultant should give their client. There's 2 things you're answering at any time a customer says something, especially in the AI world. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. You saw it work. It's possible. Part 2 is, what do we need to do to get there, right? Like, how do we get there? And the first start is an experiment. And you'd be surprised, once you've run an experiment, how much clarity you now have on what it takes to actually put something into production on all the different bullet points that I just mentioned before.
Thanks. Good.
And by the way, yes, we'll eventually get there is perfectly okay answer, perfectly professional answer, whether you're well-versed in all these new technologies or not, because you must start small. Even if somebody came to us and said, here's $1 million, we want everything that you've ever said can happen. we would still recommend experiments and tread into that lightly because of all the data discovery we need to do and user training and setting expectations culturally within the client and what's possible. Every one of those things benefits from a stepped approach. So that's a huge takeaway. Hopefully that gives you more confidence to be able to say, yes, but let's start small.
I find it fascinating that you, when you ask a client, what are the questions that you want to derive from your data? Some of those clients must go away and think, oh my God, thinking back like years, what have we always wanted to discover from our data? So it's a rather deep question.
It is. And I'll tell you something fascinating, Beatrice, is that we also then ask them, why are you asking that question? And we refer to that as the purpose. And we define a series of questions and their purpose into our instructions and our prompt templates because we define every user differently. So when one user asks a question of the same data set, they get more tailored responses back. So that exercise, that sort of deep thought of like, what am I doing here? We also ask purpose, and that is a very heavy, deep process for them that every organization can benefit from. And then the other part of it is too that often we find out that down on the user level, people just do like 10, 15 things, right? Like, I mean, it couldn't be unlimited, but if you really sit down and go, as we do with our workflow processes and creating user stories, we find out that people just rinse and repeat on the same tasks and the same questions of their data over and over. So if you can refine those and bring more value to them and help them scale using these language models and AI tools, then you're making an impact for them even in these repetitive tasks. So it's kind of an interesting thing if you really think about it that way.
And it must evolve. So once they discover what they can ask and they see what they can get delivered, then all of a sudden the doors open to things they didn't even know they wanted.
And Beatrice, that's exactly why you want to start small with an experiment as well, because you wade them into the shallow end of the pool, and then they all of a sudden they get, they can tread water a little bit, and they're like, oh wait, this is possible, and then all the amazing things happen. If you try to get somebody to think big on the amazing things they want their AI integrated systems to do, they just don't know what's capable until they experience it first. So another great reason to start with an experiment.
Thank you.
Well, cheers,
I think
everyone.
it comes, Cris, I'd just say, I think it comes back to the saying, it's not because if you can, it's whether you should. And I think that's the point I'm taking away from it is that, yeah, if you start small, you can, but if you then pump a large data set into there, it's just like, well, you shouldn't really do that yet.
And honestly, and to that point, Gary, a lot of the experiments we run, the conclusion is that thing we thought we wanted to do, we either can't do or we shouldn't do because it's not that meaningful. And often those just, it doesn't, the conversation doesn't die there. They just spin off into other things that, oh, well, we learned we could do this though. So So those are just as, I would say, as they are in a scientific lab, those outcomes are just as meaningful as the outcomes where something interesting happened. So something happened, right? So I think it's probably the biggest takeaway from all this.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you all. This is a lot of fun. I'll look forward to our next speed session and in the interest of the next presenter, which I think is Gary. Anyways, I will give back the screen and look forward to chatting with all of you across the pond sometime very soon. In the meantime, my homework assignment is to check out semantic search and be curious about the capabilities of AI for your benefit and your customers. Cheers, everybody.
Do that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Yeah. Oh, wrong one. See ya.
Okay, next up is indeed you, Gary.
It is. I don't know how the hell I'm going to follow that, but there you go. But
I'm sure you'll find a way.
But one that I know Cris has just gone, but it certainly sparked my interest. That more the point of I'm thinking about the point of if you're talking imagery sort of stuff, I'm thinking, well, I could then go over every single comic that we've got and work out which artist actually penned a certain type of comic. If you do that sort of analysis, you can then come into an awful lot of decisions how we want to move forward. So I think there's certainly avenues there. How easy it is to implement that, I do not know, but I'll come back in sometimes in the months going forward and tell you whether or not I managed to achieve it. So,
you just got to find yourself play with it, Gary.
Absolutely, plenty of time. I've got loads of time, Jill. You always know I've got loads of time. So clearly not. Right, where are we? This is a little something that I know some questions have been asked of Jewel on this from clients he's got about where people are saying there's been changes to, hopefully you can see my screen. What I wanted to get onto is, it's this screen here. Is basically Google have announced SMTP changes. Now, as we're all seasoned developers and we've got an awful lot of clients out there that are trying to send emails from a system. Now, we all know how to do this, and there's about 10 different ways you can do this. But the simplest and quickest way is you go into your settings, you set up an SMTP server and you send it and you relay it through Google. Fine, it's simple. Before you had TLS or you had certain encryption, so you said, yes, I could even tell the client is secure. Well, what Google have done is they've kind of pulled the rug from under everyone's feet very quickly and said, we're changing this. We are now not going to allow you to go into, if you go into Google admin, you're allowed to say within a domain, I would like my Google account to send less secure emails. And I know that seems weird to even invoke that in the current methodologies of where we are with security and so forth. But the purpose of that function allows a non-Google authenticated app, i.e. FileMaker, to send an email through its service. Now, we've been doing this for years. We've always had it active. You can see a timeline there that I'm sharing. Hopefully you can all see it. And it's a real world timeline of what is happening with Google. They are changing the way to ELF. So you can do OAuth. I know we can do all this in FileMaker natively now. You could go down that road. But it's more the point of, one, do we have development time to do it with all our clients? And two, what's the alternative? And something I've been looking at is that easy, simple, quick way of doing something without jumping through all the hoops of what Google is then making us do. Now, what they're making us do, by the way, I support. I'm not against it. I think we should have secure email. We should have SPF records, DKIM records attached to your email so we get everything delivered. Because if you're saying to your client, I'm delivering an email and you send it somewhere, you want it to go into the inbox and not in spam. So I understand the logic of this, but this is a anti-hacking change. This is not about deliverable. This is a way of saying, I'm authenticating access to the back end of Google. That's all this is doing. This is not going to get your deliverables sorted. However, what I'm proposing may also get your deliverables up as well. So what we've always been doing is we use this as well. And to give you another context of this, I have a photocopier in our building. Yes, it's old school, all right? I have a photocopier, but you can go up to their photocopier, you can put your document on the photocopier, you can scan it, and it'll email it straight to your inbox, right? It's a service we've had on our photocopier in our building for years. The photocopier is about 14 years old. At the moment, the only method of it to send that email is SMTP server. There is no firmware update for it. There is nothing for it. I physically cannot invoke OAuth on it. It doesn't even know about OAuth. It's so old, it doesn't support it. The photocopy is fine, still supported, still works fine. It's linked into our LDAP system, so it knows everyone's account from Active Directory. So you can go up there, put your personnel number in, scan it, old school, that you'd see in the 80s in the movies. It still works today. So I have to find a solution to that. How do I do that? I can't use Google anymore. They won't let me. Well, I can at the moment, but it's soon going to stop. So we're looking at alternatives, as Don Collier always supported, he supported Mailgun. That's a service out there. Mailgun is an excellent service. And there are many others out there. SendGrid's one, Postmark, MailChimp, which is basically Mandrill. And you've got Amazon, SES, and Spark. So they're the main ones that I'm aware of that we use. I've used Mailgun before. I've used SendGrid. SendGrid's the main one that I use. I use it for internally if we need to send something and guarantee deliverable. Because if you're just relaying through a Google account, you're not going to guarantee the deliverables. So what these companies do, they have got affiliations and partnerships for SPF delivery and DKIM, so they can basically authenticate that it's from a valid source. It should hit the inbox of where you're sending it, and they're saying, well, this sender is a valid sender. They verified that with you. They may put your domain credentials in, confirm you are who you are. You might have to put a text record on your server, on your domain, to verify you are who you are so you can send it. If you access that information and you have that in your arsenal, you can guarantee if you send through one of these partners, it will get delivered. And that's the purpose of this. So it's not just a matter of changing away from Google and going to somewhere else. I'm not saying you should move from Google if you've been using Google before. It's just that you may be forced to authenticate in a higher level of security going forward. From a point of SendGrid, which is what I'll focus on, we use that predominantly. The reason why I use that is us being us, we looked at the cost effectiveness of this. And at the moment, from what we can see, they are the cheapest out there per email message. Now, some of them, Mailgun does escalate if you get to really high levels. Mailgun can come cheaper than SendGrid, but most people aren't sending 20,000 emails a week and stuff like that. So it depends on the scheme of where you are. From our point of view, there's a couple of things that you need to be mindful about when you use these services. It's how you authenticate with them, how you integrate with them. I have not got a demo file up here. I've just got some screenshots to show you and go through stuff. So with SendGrid, for example, you set up a user account. That user account that you set up is a user for the domain that you set the account up to. You have to be the sender. So that username has to be the sender. So for SendGrid, to make it completely seamless and deliver it. So it's the quick and easiest way. You can have other options in here if you want the simple setup. You create an account in SendGrid, and if I call that G Palmer at whatever domain, I own that domain. I am that sender of that email. That's my email account, my physical email account that I'm going to use. If you set your account up with that, when you go to the next screen, what you do is you set up an API key, and it gives you a unique key. Now, note to self, the key is displayed. When you set the key up there, the key is displayed. You can never display it again. If you don't copy it, you have to create a new key. The key is a one-time only display. You have to copy it and remember it. You don't have the option to reveal it again. That's part of their security. So they've verified your process in the account. You go set it up, and then it shows the key, and that is it. You just see that key. If you need to change it, you can update your key, but it will just literally revoke the entire thing, create a new one. You can't view it. Okay, that's part of their security. From a setup point of view, in FileMaker, if you're moving this to FileMaker, I use it for Click and use it for FileMaker. So on the FileMaker side, it's really simple. So your outgoing SMTP server. So basically, if you're just using the standard protocol of send email in FileMaker, the SMTP server setup specify bit is on the left-hand side. The email address you're sending from, as I say, has to be the same as the SendGrid email account. Okay, if you make that the same, it will just work. It will send it. The SMTP details you can connect via TLS. You can set by SSL. It doesn't matter. That's fine. But the important bit of the authentication, even though it's plain text password, but it's TLS or whatever, so it's encrypted end to end, the username has to be API key. Every username in SendGrid is API key. And that key they give you is the password you paste in to FileMaker. And once you've done that, literally you can set up any button in FileMaker as you normally would do, any loop script, any script process, it will send the email no problems at all. And you authenticate by that. As I say, the reason why we use it is just to guarantee if there is a system change by a third party, if you're sending through someone else, these guys pick that up and they just deliver it. It just works every single time. On any deployments I've done, certainly for Click servers and so forth, the back end of Click, I need to get warnings and notifications of anything wrong with the system. I want something to guarantee me that if that fail happens, I will get notified. There won't be any delays in that, any issues with that. That's why I end up partnering with a third party to do this and not sending for a relay. Because you find out with a relay, they just end up going, right, oh, they've changed something on a file, or they've done, I don't know. If you're not in control of the company's network and their assets, then anything can change. But we use SendGrid for that, and that's what I mean. It's something to consider. So, and I know, Jill, you had a client that was literally asking you, saying, what do I do? Because I know this is going to change.
Yeah, absolutely. The the solution is brilliantly simple.
It's a simple solution. One thing I wanted to highlight is FileMaker training videos, and I'm definitely going to plug them. If you want the detailed ins and outs, there's an hour-long video here which goes into the ins and outs of why use something like SendGrid or a third-party company. Richard Colton video that's there is brilliant, and it also goes about the benefits of sending through someone who has got that reputation score from email deliverables for the SPF and DKIM. So I will post the video in the chat. That's fine, the link. But this will not be a waste of 50 minutes of your life. It'll be an absolute godsend. You'll get to the end of that and go, yeah, that's an easy way of doing it. From a pricing point of view, if I remember off the top of my head, SendGrid is only, I think it's free for the first, you get 100 a month emails for free for life. So if your system only sends an email for a warning, you can set up an account for absolutely nothing. All you got to do is put the right credentials in and it just works. So yeah, 100 emails a day you get on the free account.
That's
so
pretty...
depending on what, yeah, and it's free for life. You just get an SMTP relay. There is an API calls you can make to it as well. So you could even then send JSON calls into the back end of that and make API calls directly to it if you wanted to as well. So, and then if you start then get into more emails, I think the starter level goes to, hold on, let me just see what it is. Yeah, you can get to, for $19 a month, you can get up to 50,000 emails.
It's nothing.
For $19. So it totally depends on where your system is. As I say, for notifications on the back end of click deployments I've done, I'm just like, well, if there's an error, tell me about it. Well, I might get 10 emails a week at best. It's a perfect account. It's free.
Perfect, Gary. I mean that.
So that's what I wanted to share. Don't know if it's useful for everyone or not, but definitely have a look at the Richard Colton thing because it goes into full detail of how it's done. He also goes through a process of. I was fortunate. I copied the actual API key. He took a snapshot of it and then used AI to then do it. And he realized he had L's and ones and stuff in it. So it mucked his key up. So he had to go and reset it. So he goes a couple of little tips he's got in his video, which is really good. The things not to do as well. So, but it's worth looking at. That's it. That's what I wanted to share as far as
Great. Just as a quick poll, does anyone use SendGrid or equivalent take this approach to sending emails from FileMaker? How many people do that generally?
John does.
Yeah, I can see one hand. No, maybe a little bit more.
Your experience, John, with it? I'd say we've been using it for a while, but
excellent. Greg's got his hand up because the system that he uses, I partly wrote. A quick thing about using the API is you have to send attachments to SendGrid as base64. That's absolutely fine because clearly you can't send a container in a JSON object. You can't send the file, so you have to base64 it. When you base64 a file, the amount of data goes up by 30% in terms of the size by base64ing it. My recommendation is that you don't pass the base64 around in your scripts. What you do is pass a record ID with maybe a field name, and only at the point where you're sending it do you go and grab the data, because otherwise you're passing base64 in the payload to another script or something else. So literally just get the base64 at the last possible moment, so that you're not sending loads of stuff around your system.
Cool.
Yeah, great advice.
Is the purpose of that, John, because it'll encode it and encode it and encode it, so therefore it balloon, or?
No, it's just if you have a, if you have 100, even if you have a 100K file, it's going to be 140K as the base64 string, and you're then passing that from this script to another script and setting a variable. So you're kind of chewing through cache memory unnecessarily. unless you just go, tell you what, hey, let's go. And in that particular case, it was like, oh, I've got 4 attachments depending on the script parameters.
Exactly, yeah.
So, hey, just get this standard document, get this other variable document, get this and get this, base64 them up only just the minute before you want to send it to SendGrid. You can't avoid sending it over the wire to them, but
no,
that's just a little tip.
Cool.
Yeah, I see from the comments that there's a couple of other people who use things, and Ian, you sound like you've had an interesting experience at Signal.
Yeah. Scale to millions of messages a month. I'm not sure there's a tariff for that. There is one. I have to say the Pro on SendGrid does that. So
the open
it will scale to that, but it'll cost you $1,000 a month to send 2 million emails.
Yeah. Gary, I think I'll probably answer this question by Sam H in there. If a client has 10 users, I have to set up 10 SendGrid accounts. Well, presumably you just set up one account and use that for everyone.
Yeah, you can verify each. You can have one account as far as that's concerned. Yes. You can also add. You can do it as a single user account, or you can have a multiple user account. I'd have to look into details of it, but there is a way you can then say, I have multiple email addresses in one account. The only thing you have to do with SendGrid is verify each one of those email addresses, otherwise it won't deliver it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I have to say, SendGrid's, and John will vouch for this, SendGrid's actual site is awesome. Their help is brilliant. The documentation is so well written. They have everything covered as far as that's concerned. Literally have a look on there. I'm 99% sure you create one account and you verify multiple email addresses against that account. Then you'll be able to send it.
Yeah, I had a look at Mailgun years ago, and it wasn't that. I found their site quite hard to follow. And I did look at SendGrid, I think, at that time. But stretching back into the past, my memory is that SendGrid was a lot better in terms of ease of comprehensibility.
And it's now owned by Twilio as well.
Yeah.
At the time
Twilio
it
bought
wasn't.
it.
Right. If there aren't any more questions, I think we're ready for you, John.
Marvelous.
If you're ready.
Of course I'm ready.
Of course you are.
Let's go to here. So I now can't see who's got. So I thought we could do a quick zip through, and this is going to be a quick Cris Ippolite speed zip through the whole of the Otto ecosphere. There's a couple of places where we could come back in the future and do a more in-depth presentation. It's not a commercial presentation because I don't stand to make any money from it, and you'll see why in a moment. But there's a kind of why some of these kinds of tools are developed now. And it's off the back of Cris giving us 2 very important things: the data migration tool and then the admin API. So at the point when they moved away from the Java admin console to something more modern, it's like, oh, we can write an API for that. Within the community, a desire for a better way to do things in terms of handling the files that we have and the processes that we have to do with the files that we have, along with how much of a bring your own mentality is there in the community. If we can write things in FileMaker to do things to FileMaker, utility tools that we all have, that's like a really cool thing. So FileMaker at some point introduced, I tried to find out when, it's quite a long time ago, introduced a data migration tool, but it was only initially available as part of the FileMaker developer subscription. So you had to pay money and you got it as a part of the reward. It's a command line tool that is designed to take a clone of a file and a file that is full of data and move the data from the full file into the cloned file. That's effectively what that is. We've now got to a point where everybody has access to it, and it's also now, in the most modern versions, when you install Server, it's installed by default for you. What that means is you don't have to keep going and downloading it, going, oh, have I got the right version? It's just there in all flavors. So 3 kind of use cases. or you might have to recover a file because it's crashed, do some work on it, clean it up, clone it, and then backfill it with current data. Or you might have made a massive mistake in a file and you want to go back to yesterday's version or last week's version for the customers, but fill it up with data. Or the big use cases, don't develop live on a file, but you do want to be able to develop a file and then give it to the customer, the new work to the customer with their data in it. Link that to admin API, turned up in about FileMaker 17. It's gone through several iterations now. So we get the ability by using HTTP post commands to get or set server options. Some things that we can set with the admin API, we can only set through the admin API. There isn't even a button in the admin console to do some of the things that we can do. But we can automate then, therefore, all kinds of user actions. And several people in the community, Klaus Levent, Mike Duncan at Soliant, have written FileMaker helper files to then talk to your servers via the admin API. The link there is where to find the documentation for it on your own server, if you don't know. So the kinds of things we might have considered that we might want to do as a scenario is, I've got a file here that's a template file. I want it somewhere else for a new starting point for a customer file. I'd like to put it on another server and rename it. I might want to, say, take my development environment file, push it somewhere else and fill it with some other data. If I've got any kind of vertical market solution, I may be wanting to do that multiple times, either to different servers or I've got, because with an SBA, you can have multiple clients on one server. I might want to do that task multiple times on the same server. But also, I may want to get my development copy full of the latest production data, like a reverse thing, so that I'm actually working with some latest real records. I might want to do that frequently, regularly. I might want to do something after I've done it. So the old school way of doing this, hands up anybody who's wasted afternoons doing this stuff in varying degrees, was you kick all the users off, you close the file, you download it locally. Anything with a red star on takes time, okay? And then you can reopen it, and then we do what we have to do. We might need to rename the file, we might need to clone it. We could then run the data migration locally on our machine, so therefore limited by the power of our machine. Or the really old school way was, here's a clone of a file, which I open, and then I have to go through my old file, importing the records one table at a time. And when I've finished, go and reset all the maximum serial numbers. But you have to do it in the right order, where there are calculated fields that reference other fields. And honestly, we've all wasted an awful lot more time than we need doing that. The file, when you open it, picks up the defaults from the machine you're on, so you have to make sure it's the right locale. Then we have to upload the finished thing to a new server. Also takes time. And then finally, we can open something new. Anything from an hour to an afternoon as a process. So I found the original press release, November 2021, so 3 years ago. Otto version 3 was made public with a strapline of automated file and data migration, scheduled deployments, easy access to live files and backups. And they made it public at the time they had first made a Linux version. And at the time, it was a paid, there's a test version, but it was a paid product. You either paid for a license for 3 servers or 10 or multiples of that. And so we'll talk about what it was in a second. Adopted by some people in the community, mostly people who understood or really wanted the features. There were, however, a lot of buts to that. One of them may have been the payment. Other things like it was something that needed another port opened for it to work, and not everybody's IT teams love doing that. Not everybody's confident in doing that. And what you got with it was a local file. Well, you could have it local or hosted, called Migrator, which could talk to Otto on the FileMaker server and automate the actions you wanted to do. So you could build a migration, click a button, and it would go off and do some magic. Worked really well. Not limited in the sense that it couldn't do the job, but it didn't have lots of options. It did the thing you asked it to do. Big step change was announced last year at Engage, this year, sorry, at Engage in Austin. Brand new version 4, headline free for life. Okay, so that's like a proper FileMaker cost, isn't it? We love that. Free for everything that I'm about to show you. If you want to pay for support, then you can do, but otherwise you have to go to a new community site and get lots of support. All brand new from the ground up, and everything that you see has a very modern web framework kind of interface, which enables there to be a lot of feature updates and improvements, as well as occasional fixes. I did forget to write how many subversions there have been since February. It's a lot, but the developers are very active in terms of going, oh, that's a good idea. We'll make that happen then. And Migrator is now a file called Otto Deploy, which gets deployed to your server and is served in a eat your own dog food kind of way. So when you say, yes, I'd like Otto Deploy, please, Otto goes and gets it from the Proofgeist servers and brings it to your server using the very tool that you have. So there's nothing for you to do other than go, yes, please. And because it's Otto Deploy itself is a single page web app, like Seed Code as a product, it can auto update its own code quite simply when there's an update. So the pieces of the Otto kind of ecosphere are something called Otto FMS. This is what gets installed on your server. It's written in React, I think. It's a little node service. That link is the homepage. That's where to go and find it if you've never found it before. Otto Deploy is a FileMaker file which gives you access to all the things that Otto can let you do. Simple Queue is their file for handling webhooks, but you don't have to use that. You can absolutely use your own file to do that. Show you that in action. And then finally, a website which is console.automatic.com, where if you have multiple servers, you can aggregate being able to work with them all. They've done it because they've now moved into hosting, and they need to give customers a way to manage the servers. The documentation is also rather super. There's the link to it, and there's the new link to the community website. So fundamentally, the word they've picked for what they're doing is creating a build, which you then use to drive a deployment. So you create something, maybe as either if it's a clone, it doesn't zip it. If it's pushing the whole of data, it will zip the file up and then move it to another server, unzip it. So this little diagram talks you through just that process. We start somewhere with a file, and we're going to create a build from it. Now that may be cloning it, or it may be copying it, and we move that to the destination server. The destination server absolutely can be the same server that you're on. It doesn't have to be another server. The next thing, number 4, is if we're doing a data migration, we migrate. So it just sends the clone. So it's quick, easy, small. On the remote server, it triggers the data migration tool to migrate the data into this clone file. Before anything else then happens, it runs a backup of the production data file, so that if anything goes wrong, you can roll back to where you were just at the start of this process. And then the file that you just filled with data replaces the one that you just backed up. And then it opens it all by itself. and if necessary, runs a post-migration script. So every single one of those boxes we can do by ourselves manually. This is write something that says, I want this to happen there, and it ends up being this with this file, and then click a button and off we go, and it works. So it's just saved us hours of managing the process. So compared to old school ways of doing things, what do we want to do? We want to do a backup or a clone of a file, want to move it somewhere else, maybe rename it, and then when we've finished, open it and automate all of that stuff with one click. So let's stop wasting an hour or an afternoon moving data. Let's just do a click and then go off while it's happening and make a cup of tea or do something else useful. So how it actually works is that the deployment creates a system script schedule to make the action happen, because the admin API allows you to make a script and make a schedule, and that schedule can be a script type. And if you can write the script that you want it to run, then it will run. That's what's triggering effectively the data migration tool as a command line tool. So that can be scheduled at a time in the future. And because it's now a script schedule in the admin console, if you decide you want to change the time it's running, you can go into the admin console and change the time in the script, because it's just going to run that script at that time. And since version 4.4 of Otto, that can also be recurring. Do the same task every Saturday night at midnight. Quick thing, if you have two deployments that are going to end up running on a server, need to make sure that they don't try and run simultaneously in any way. You can't run a deployment when another one's happening. It will fail. Make sure you know how long it's going to take and wait before the next one is scheduled. Requirements, it has to be behind a qualified domain name with an SSL. Just doesn't work in any other circumstance. And the Claris certificate isn't good enough to do it. It has to be proper SSL. So people have got hinksy IT frameworks that really struggle with this. But for the rest of us, it's like, yeah, okay, bread and butter. The minimum you need is 4 core and 8 gig to run it, because it's doing some kind of quite difficult tasks. So don't try and run it on a tiny, tiny little test server, because you'll almost certainly have a disappointing experience. If you're on Windows servers, because to do bits of the transfer, it has to use IIS. IIS is very aggressive at throttling large file transfers, and people who trying to use this on Windows with very big things are really struggling with the speed, but it's a Windows issue. Eventually, hopefully, well, you can now install Nginx as the engine on Windows, but obviously that requires a lot of workarounds as well. Since a recent version, you can use concurrency, and what Otto's doing, it uses more processors, so you get the benefit of 2 processors, not 1. But as a rule of thumb, it's also going to use a lot more resources. So whatever the size of your production, the biggest file in your migration is, you need at least 3 times that free space on disk, and at least 2 times that in terms of available memory or memory with virtual memory. And just don't use T-type instances on AWS, the burstable ones, which say, oh, we'll build up credits when you're not doing anything and then use them when you are. Otto's very processor intensive, and just eventually it'll just kill the instance down to a point where it's crawling, and then you'll wonder why it's taking forever. So just don't use T-type instances. So the kinds of patterns that may be enabled by Otto as a service. Hey, I've got a template file that I want to use when I set up a new customer file, for example. The classic, hey, I want to take some of my development work and put it onto production, absolutely can be the same server. It doesn't have to be another one, which genuinely, although I've hidden that as a tiny little thing, is there, therefore, if we have a tool that can do this for us, is there any reason why we should do live development anymore, other than the fact that something has to be fixed right now? And to make this happen, it has to kick users off at some point. But as a matter of course, because I can do this to the same server, why can't I just develop offline and then push it out at the end of the day? So all of those, there's another thing that they've considered, which is what about low downtime? So in a situation where you've got loads of users on the system, so you can create, if you're moving a lot of data, so you say, hey, I want to move this file from here to here, you can create the build, zip it up, and move it to the destination in that's one step. And then when that is finished, then you can run the migration. So the migration is the thing where you have to kick users off. But if that part is the only bit where you're waiting for something to happen, you're not waiting for the whole build to happen. You're just saying, oh, now I've got everything I need. Now just go off and do this little bit. Then hopefully you're in a position where you can reduce the amount of downtime for customers. So once you've installed Otto, put in your license key, here's the way in. So just as a note there, this is the FileMaker server admin console username and password. Okay? It's not a different username and password because we're putting something over or on top of the admin console. So you log in with your server admin username and password. And this is the screen that you see. For those of you who love these things, there is a dark mode. Most of the things on the screen you can click and toggle. Okay, the orange color in this is all configurable. If you hate it, you can make it whatever color you want in the end. So I'm going to quickly, just a bunch of screenshots, really quickly working down what those menus are on the left. You can ask questions afterwards. So that's the dashboard. It gives you some quick overviews of things that are obvious, but also things that are specific to Otto. Here you go. So here's how many databases, here's how many guests, how many schedules I've got, here's how many webhooks I've received, here's how many deployments I made. So next tab down is a list of the deployments that you've done. In order, you can see, in this case, a couple of them failed for a specific reason. This is a kind of test demo-y thing. On the right-hand side, always look out for 3 dots. 3 dots is your kind of hamburgery menu. And if you click on one of the deployments, you get more detail about it. So this is the summary view. There's also there a detailed log view, which is the log of everything that's happened, as well as the log of the data migration tool, all kind of aggregated. So if something goes wrong, you get a really good opportunity to know exactly where it might have gone wrong. So next, a proper file manager, not for the whole of your server, okay? Just want to stop and think about that. Any of those, so this contains the backups folder, the documents folder, the HTTP folder, the scripts folder, your live databases folders, as well as some config folders. If you double click any one of those, it's a proper file browser. So all the little buttons at the top work. Create a new folder, upload a file, download a file, delete a file. So bottom of the screen, it's unfortunate that my SSH client does this in purple. For the purpose of this demo, I made a test folder in a folder, in the scripts folder. It automatically does it with the right permissions. So normally you'd have to log on to your SSH server, go to the right folder, do an mkdir to make the folder, then change the ownership, then change the permissions, then get out. It's about 6 actions. Here, I click a button, type in the name, and the folder's made. So we've got a fully fashioned file browser for the key folders of FileMaker. Okay, so for all those people that are really still nervous of command line in Linux, you don't need to be anymore. Genius, I think. Next tab down is keys. There's two areas. There are API keys and data API keys. At the admin API key, They're both key proxies, so you have to enter a username and a password. It generates a key which you can then use somewhere else. Talk about that in a second. So these are long-lasting admin or data API keys. So if you use the admin API, you get a key, and you either have to revoke it or it just dies after 15 minutes. So if you try and use the same token again in 16 minutes time, it won't work. What this service is doing is going, if you use that API key proxy, then we'll just deal with all the bit about, is it live? And if it's not, we can get a new one. So that also means you can pass that access key to anything that's third party that needs access to your system. So you're not exposing usernames and passwords. You're just saying, use this key here. Obviously the data API keys work with any file where there's a user account that's got FMRest turns on. And if you add /Otto before any kind of URL, so that may be a URL that you're giving to somebody, you say, oh, you can kind of grab this data. If you prefix it with Otto, it goes through Otto first, and then you can use that Otto API key either as an authorization, as a bearer token in the header, or as a query parameter just on the end. Because there's no insecure data in it, nobody knows what it can do. And like everything else, you're then in control of the keys. If you feel it's been compromised, you can turn it off and regenerate it without a problem. Next tab down, webhooks, list of webhooks. And this shows one of the, if you haven't got simple queue on this machine, would you like it? And if you click the deploy button, it will bring it to your machine and open it for you. Or you can click the X and make it go away forever, so you don't have to have that notification. If you click into a webhook, this is how you set one up. Excuse me. So it's linked to a specific file with a specific user account using the API key that you just set up. So the API key is where you go in and say, or with the data API key is you go, for this file, here's a username and password as right privilege. So you can have multiple data API keys. So that string at the top is the webhook. Okay. There's an ability to test the webhook. So click the button, it will just send it off to the webhook and you can check whether it's arrived or not. But all you need to pass to something else is the whole string at the top. So what do webhooks do for people that are not totally familiar? You get a real-time response update from something that is an external app or service driven by an action. When this thing happens in somebody else's system, if it can output a webhook, it says, at this point, I've done this, send this data to this place. Okay, it's like text notification for computers. Okay, automatic text notifications. So, as in the previous thing, there's how a webhook going through Otto is structured. You can either set up the webhook manually, like that screen showed, or if you click the little button that says auto register, anything that comes into your Otto server that's formatted correctly, if it doesn't have a webhook for it, it'll just generate one for you. And to aid with the process of you using them, they helpfully create an add-on, which we'll talk about what that does in a second, which you can just download, double-click, add to your file. To make webhooks work through Otto needs three things only. A table called Otto Receiver, two fields, one called channel and one called payload, and a script called Otto Receiver. Whatever is at the end of the Otto Receiver script is what gets passed back to the webhook. So when you test it, whatever's coming back out of that script it comes back to you. Most webhooks are just looking for a 200 success. They're not looking for anything specific. It just enables you to understand what's going on. And within, so what happens is webhook comes in, it creates a record. The data that's been passed to it goes into the payload field, and in the URL that you've given them, the bit which is the channel goes into the field called channel. So that's the routing. Take this data, put it into a record where you've got a channel and payload. So the data API is called to create a record and run a script in a known place. So that's why you can't change the name of those. But within that script, you then just create loads of branching logic based on, is this record, what's the channel of this record? As a tip, don't do massive gate processes in that script, because if it takes a very long time to do things in another file, some webhooks will think it's timed out. So get out of it really quickly. And now we have the ability to run a perform script on server from inside a script that is technically running on the server. So just send it off and don't wait for any instructions. Don't wait for any response. There's the add-on link. So here's a file that I use. Doesn't look very lovely, doesn't have to. Here's a record. The channel, I did the test button. The channel payload that it's sent. So that can be anything you like. And here's an example of starting to work on a script. So if the channel's this, do this. If it's this, do this. If it's this, do this. So anytime you set up a new channel, just need another branch in this script to do whatever you want to do. Next tab down, server, gives you everything that is available to you in the admin console. At the top, databases tab. Here are all the databases. This shows whether they're encrypted or not, shows whether they're opened or closed, how many clients there are. You can do singly or multiply all of the actions you can do. Open them, close them, pause them. Next tab, clients. Here's all the clients you've got, how many files they've got open, how long they've been open, what version of FileMaker you're running. You can message them or kick them off at will. And additionally, services. Now, here's something you absolutely can't do from the admin console. The HTTP server goes tits up because something's gone wrong. From here, I can restart the service, or I can stop it and then come back and start it later. Okay, because effectively what I'm doing is triggering something on my server to run some command line things. I haven't had to write any of the code to do that. I just need to know I click the green or orange button, which for somebody like me, magic. There is also a proper decent, next tab, log viewer. It isn't just Otto logs, it's all of the FileMaker logs. So here, for example, on this particular one is the data API log. Slightly nicer than the FileMaker view, but you can clear it, you can reset it, you can download it from here as well. Okay, so being able to go into your server without opening up the admin console and having to click between the way FileMaker have done it. It's just a replacement for that with knobs on, basically.
How long do the logs go back for, John?
And as far as the size that you've set.
All right.
So if you set a 40 gig log and it doesn't do very much, it'll go back for months if you're using a lot of, so it is just the log. So in the admin console right now, it's the same thing. You can view the log. It will have all the records in it. When you download it, it will be whatever is in the log.
Yeah. But
the advantage here is there's a button that says clear the log if you want to temporarily do that. Settings, change the color, change the nickname, give the server a tag. Offsite backups are another setting that is in here. So for those who want to consider this, Otto can trigger moving your backups to any S3 compliant storage. That's AWS, Wasabi, Backblaze, comma, ... anything else that uses the S3 language. It, again, to say, oh, I want this to happen, it uses a FileMaker schedule to do it. you have the choice of including or not including external container data. And since I suggested it several versions ago, you can now run multiple schedules based on a backup for this folder and that folder and that folder at different times. So you could move one file to your offsite location every night at midnight and another file back up to your offsite server every Friday or every 3 days. But that's where you set up offsite backups. Then just some config things for Otto FMS as well. A maximum number of files you want to keep and some information about the server. So that's everything you get in Otto when you go into the admin console. Admin console replacement, run through Otto with knobs on. If you then step back and start to use Automatic, which allows you to do this with multiple servers at the same time. Okay? So it's a way of aggregating. So again, they've built it so that you can manage all of the servers that they're hosting for you. But as long as you have a server with Otto on it, you can include it in your Automatic Cloud Console. I'm just showing you my 3 favorite servers, so I don't show you how many I'm actually managing using this. But I get some high-level overview. What version of FileMaker is it? What version of Otto is it? Where is it? Is it Windows, Linux, or Mac? The 2 buttons at the end will take you directly to either the Otto console or the Cris admin console for that server. Okay, so I tend to start here and decide which one I want to go into individually. That's it in list view. There's also like a card view, which instantly starts to show you the basic metrics about your server. So you can at a glance see which one's in danger of running out of space, what's memory running at, and all that kind of stuff. If you click one of the servers, you get a more extensive, pretty view of some of the metrics. So where it is, what it is, with how many connections, with the disk uses, with the server stats, which are already there, but aggregated with the data API usage, for example, which may be of use. So some of the other buttons have moved around, but all the other buttons above the brown lines are exactly what you'd expect to see. Databases tab, clients tab, services tab, logs tab, file browser tab is all what I've just shown you, just in a slightly different order, but with the benefit that at the bottom of the services, from here, I can then restart Otto on any particular server. Instead of having to log into it, go to the command line and restart it, I can just run that from here because this will run a command line script on my server for me. And at the bottom, just get back up, down at the bottom, click Tools, and you get to several useful tools that they provided for you, one of which is fabulous help, a URL builder. So if you're using FMPRLs, but you can't remember where Tony White's cheat sheet is to help you write them, this will just do it for you. Fill in the boxes, and here's what you need, whether that parameters some JSON, so it'll URL encode the JSON for you, or put some text in, choose the version if it's version specific, which server, because it knows which server you've got, what the file, and so if you select the server, it knows which files are on that server. So there's no typing, it's literally just click and action. Then you can copy it off and send it to somebody. A couple of other useful tools that are there. And that's when you go to ottofms.com, that's the home page. Further down there is where you then kind of download it. So that's like a proper helicopter view of everything that's in Otto. I think there's scope for how do you do migrations and set it up if you've never used it before, but that could take like a whole session, whole evening probably. On the help site, there's lots of little bits of videos of Todd or Kyle showing you how things work, as well as really good documentation on how it works. Or you can find me and send me an email if you need a tiny bit of help. The community is very responsive. Some people who are on here, some UK developers are in there. Woodges, James Glendenning's been on a few times. I'm in there. But literally, making a decent suggestion almost guarantees that it'll end up in the product as well, because they're trying to write a tool that works for as many people as possible. And that feels like it's time. Happy to answer any questions.
Yes, please do ask questions, people. That's left me saying, why haven't I been using this, John?
Well, that's kind of the point, isn't it? If you've never, it's not like it's just like, if you've never used it, here's what it is and what it'll do. I know there are some people here who are using it regularly. I clearly do. It's free, so why wouldn't you consider, if it's going to give you something, it's not going to cost you anything other than your time to learn it.
Yeah.
I think it's immensely powerful as a thing. Webhooks are, for me, they've become my new territory for the last 3 months. Working with things that spit out webhooks. I was working on a system yesterday. So these people use jot forms a lot. So somebody submitted a jot form. I was looking at the record. The end user went back and edited the form and resubmitted it. While I was looking at the screen, the data updated in front of my eyes, because automatically it takes the inbound webhook, runs that script on it that says, oh, I know where you need to live, just update these fields. And literally, I was looking at the screen as it updated.
Wow.
It's magic. That's all I can say. It's magic. So, any questions?
I have.
Go on.
You knew I would. You knew I would. No, two things. Brilliant demo. I agree with what you've said there. I think from the admin console point of view, if you are not using something like Zabbix or something to monitor your server, there's no excuse but to install this. It's free. Just stick it on your server. It's going to give you much more of an insight to your server. Just that little diagram of the dashboard of how your server's performing is just golden. I think if you haven't got that easily in the admin console, you've got a lot more information there. So to me, that's fine. My only question is, I know it's who's written it, but really, how does it work with large format files? Because you know what I've got. I would not want to run a migration and press one button and go, yeah, deploy my server, please. Thank you very much.
But what I think I'd do is point you to some of the people in the community who I know are doing large or have done extensive migrations, whether that's size of individual files or people who are doing the migration with 50 files as part of the migration. Okay. So I haven't gone into depth about how that works, about you can split it up into sub-deployments, but I would point you at some of those so you could ask people their actual experiences. I understand your systems are in their own way massive, but so my question is, have you timed doing a data migration offline with a clone with your production file? How long would that take?
Never done it.
So there you go. So that's the first thing you're going to go. You're going to have to do that experiment first, because nobody can answer any other questions you have until you have a baseline.
My question is one of the things I'm looking at this thinking how this would work. So we've currently got 4 servers that run our deployment. But they're all interlinked. So the thing is, if I want to change a file on server A, I have to make sure there's no traffic on the file on server 4, if you see what I mean, or server D, because that could impact, because if that file's down at the point something's writing, that could have an impact. So for me, I'm looking at this thinking, there's a way I could do a deployment and say, right, I would like you to drop the file on server A, but make sure you stop or pause everything on server D as well with these associated files. To me, that could be golden, because we physically do that ourselves. We kick everyone off, shut the files down, pause them all, and do the deployment manually.
That's a whole presentation itself about how the specifics of the Otto Deploy file works and what you can and can't do, involving kicking people off and all that kind of stuff. This wasn't designed to be that kind of presentation, but happy to talk with you a bit and also point you at some people. So I do. So Greg's. I do know the system that Greg works with. decently large file. I introduced Otto into the company. Greg now absolutely loves it because it gives him a load of things. Maybe you'd like to say something, but I don't really. But I know Greg's using decently large files as his production file into clone. He's not, there are some limits to it. It uses resources, blah, blah, blah. You have systems that need to have high uptimes, but that's your very specific use case. So the answer is, maybe it isn't quite as useful for you as it is for other people.
I think I can work around that. That's the point. I think if it makes, we still do maintenance and developments and deployments on our own servers. And you're right, it is that scratch head moment. And we have me, Penny, and Ben going, right, watch is synchronized, ready to go.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be that. It should be, we're just going to do this and it's going to be okay and it's going to be fine. And that's it. We've got smaller deployments within what we do that we have to update that aren't so interlinked to our bigger systems. And to me, this just, I can't believe I wasn't privy to this, and I can't believe where I've been for God knows how long. But I'm certainly going to be passing this on to the team and going, have a look at this, because this might be golden, absolute gold.
So one of the big things for me is I work with lots of new small clients. I have a template file that I want to start with. It sits on one server. I can push it to any server that's got Otto on, anywhere. It doesn't have to, all it just has to have is Otto on it and running. So I can move it to another server and rename it in the process. And instantly I have my starter file for a new client, maybe on a new server. That's,
that feature alone is brilliant. I really like that idea.
Cool. Always create more work for me, John.
Well, hopefully it's, but in the end, Gary, we're trying to save you work by bringing you the kinds of tools that are going to really help.
Definitely, we'd love.
I don't know, Gary, if you have ever used a 360 deploy tool, it was like this tool is actually 10 times better, 10 times faster, and 10 times more, better experience than anything else before. So you have to try it.
Cool. You're in the same ballpark as me for size as well, Greg. Thanks for posting that in the chat. So that does make me feel a bit more comfortable.
Some of the files, even single files, I think is 50-60 gig. And I'm still in the front of a computer while doing it. Of course, doing something else in the meantime. I'm monitoring it, but I shouldn't, because I'm so confident at this point. But we're not doing a lot of deployment these days. It's like very light projects recently, but and that's why I'm waiting, because there's lots of pre-launching and post-launching launch processes. So that's why I'm just monitoring it. But other than that, you don't have to.
Greg, quick question for you. How does it deal with? We're still on Windows. We haven't moved to Linux yet, so we're on Windows. How does it deal with large deployments of container data? Because we've got one deployment that's got a lot of container data, and once you go secure, you know how many files that is. We're talking millions of files on a Windows server. So does it cope okay with that, or is it something
I'm not sure how I can tell it, because if you understand the process of the deployment, you actually send in a clone to the destination server. So your container data is already there. You're not moving it actually. All you do is filling your clone with the data and the references. So I'm not sure about this scenario. Maybe John can send something.
Well, in the migration scenario, dev to production, Greg's right. You're not moving any of your production data off the server it's on. It's only when you want to say, oh, can I have somehow can I have a copy of that live production data somewhere else?
Yeah, that would be the issue.
So let's go back to that slide early on. Windows IIS is the problem. Very large files will make it appear very slow to do the transfer, but it's IIS that is the problem, not Otto. And they can't at the moment get round that It's to do with what IIS is doing. So again, that's a test and an experiment. So
yeah, absolutely.
What really happens on something that doesn't matter.
Yeah, definitely worth looking at. And I just like it for the ease of, as I say, if you're using server and you just put this on there, I guarantee there's a function on there sometime in the future that you're going to go, I wish I could. Oh, I can. So,
yeah.
and that's it.
Greg's put in the chat, I didn't mention it, to install Otto is a simple one-line terminal command. And that will auto update Otto. On Linux, it takes less than a minute and a half to remove the old version and install the new version and get it back up and running again. So the fear of, oh, I've got loads of webhooks coming in, I might miss some, is significantly reduced because that is so fast. They provide you a script to run on Mac, Linux, and or Windows. It takes a bit longer in Windows because of how Windows uninstall works. Really, really quick. Simple line just to update. It's been, they've made that bit as easy as possible. It's not like go somewhere, download it, double click the installer, just run a single command line. So it's in terminal, permanently open, hit up and enter to run it again.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, throughout your talk, John, I was literally thinking back to a meeting I had last week with the client, and he kept saying things like, well, we want to do this, for example, we want to have the same data in the test server as the production server. We just answered it. And that talk was full of that, which is great. I just wanted to ask you, whenever you set up a new server, do you automatically install also as part of it now?
Yes. Why
wouldn't you? Yeah.
It's like,
why wouldn't you?
It's not costing me anything. So all I need, so you set up an account, which gives you your key. When you open Otto for the first time, it says paste that key in. Then somewhere on the license page at that end, you can see all the servers that you have this license key installed on. But you're not doing anything. But it's free and it doesn't get in the way, and it's written by somebody who knows what they're doing and is constantly monitoring and updating it. Why would you not install it by default, along with your five other default things? On Linux, install unzip, change the time zone, install Otto. It's just part of what you do.
Yeah.
Even if you never use it, it's just there. So you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a default part of all my installations now, setting up new servers. So, yeah. And I think I'm sure Gary will agree, much like to have you back to talk through a bit more detail of some of that, as you said. Okay. So that another one, maybe the next FMBug, Gary?
Yeah, definitely. There's plenty in there. I think there's so much scope in this. So.
Maybe if some of you go and play with things and then actually come also send me some specific questions, I can target a presentation around things that you're not quite sure of or want demoing. Like I say, the documentation website is constantly updated. There are little videos in there of some of it working. You're not left to try and work out how it all works. Todd posted only about 2 days ago onto LinkedIn, which I'm going to try and find the link for it. So they used AI to help them build the documentation. Because the other thing I didn't mention was Otto has its own API. Of course it does. So that you can call it, you can write a FileMaker file which calls Otto to do things. You don't have to use their web interface. That's the first thing. They used AI to help them write the documentation. He has just trained Claude in the Otto API documentation, and the demo is him doing the thing that he's best at, which is just experimenting for the first time. He's like a child with his eyes open. So he writes a prompt in Claude that says, "Can you write a script to do this?" And what he gets back is FileMaker XML. You have to convert it from text to a clipboard object to paste into a FileMaker file that will use the Otto API because it knows everything about the documentation. I'm going to go off and find the link to it. It was on LinkedIn. It is quite extraordinary to see that working as well. I mean, it's the first step of, well, without even having to work out what you'd need to do in a script, just use Claude. Now, clearly they've trained it. At some point, I don't know, is he going to make that available to us? Let's see. So
just to follow up about using AI. So initially, I thought it's going to be very difficult to build FileMaker scripts from ChatGPT except calculations. But after I've seen Todd did this, I grabbed any clip with XML, I pass it to ChatGPT, not Claude even, and ask him, create me a script in FileMaker script based on this format. And he did. All I had to do is copy it to any clip manager and flag it as, for example, steps and paste it. And it works straight away. So that opens the doors for almost anything we have ever imagined. Just because I'm sure you watch the web development space, how they use Claude, Cursor, or anything, or probably you've heard something at least down the lines. And this is probably the beginning of development on FileMaker with proper scripts. There is a problem obviously with schema and things like that. Like I can imagine 300 fields in how you're gonna do it. You probably have to program your functions, things like that. But we are here already.
Yeah. So the link's in there. Yes, Ian, it's the documentation, the API documentation is based on the Open API standard. So that was like from the beginning they did that. And it's just like Clip Manager was from MyFM Butler. You can modify the text. It just takes that text and turns it back into the right flavor of clipboard object, like base elements might do with a text XML text object. It just needs to be the right flavor so that when you paste it into FileMaker, FileMaker knows what to do with it. But that's like a one-line tool to be able to do that. Again, I think where we're at with AI, we're all riding on the coattails of people like Ian and Cris, Ippolite and Todd, who are doing things so that I don't have to waste 3 months of my life learning how to do that. It's giving me a real quick boost up the ladder, just riding on. But then that's what a developer community is about. You want to
definitely
take the best of what everybody else is doing because it kickstarts your development way up the ladder really quickly. So
there was an article by Dimitris Koukoutsardis on LinkedIn. I think it was today I saw it. Coming soon, copy from FileMaker script workbase, paste into any editor or AI chat, and copy AI's results directly back into FileMaker.
This is exactly what I've tested, like probably 2 days ago.
Yeah.
He's speaking about that the Rome FileMaker week. Is that right?
Yeah.
So I'm also speaking there, so I'm going to get a chance to see that presentation live, so I can we can maybe kind of talk a bit about that next time. Equally, at some point, he's gone, oh, here's a version, here's a paid version. You're going to go, in the end, you're not going to make any money out of the paid version because everybody else is going to work out how to do it for free. Just don't even bother. Just make it available to the community so that we all get the benefit of your learning. That's, in my humble opinion, he said quickly.
Well, free, got to agree with you, John.
Well,
free is always good.
But in the spirit of the community, I thoroughly agree. Yeah.
It's so clearly he wants to recover the time that he spent doing that, but Greg's just done it. So Greg, write a tool for us, make it free. There you go. Thank you very much.
Very tempting.
Well, because the reality is because if this gives us a massive jump forward in terms of personal productivity, then you want everybody to be that productive. Ultimately, you want the whole community to be better practice. Blah blah blah. You want, and we'd all like to be Cris, Ippolite, as quickly as we can. Chris has been doing this, and Ian's been doing this for 5-6 years. And
fun fact: I did this on a free version of ChatGPT for all, and before after I've completed my test, I've just run away of the token. So it was that quick. So I think I can even show you a screenshot how I did it, because this is nothing, and I didn't do it like Cris or Ippolite that did all the experimentation or something like that. I just wanted to repeat what Todd did, and I'm just looking for sharing screen if I can.
It should be.
Anyone can help me?
At the bottom, it should be a green dot saying share.
You have to have your mouse over it.
Hover over the menu at the bottom, Greg.
Yeah, I've got it. Oh, it's in green screen. Oh my goodness. Okay, so here's my window of ChatGPT. Yep. So what I did.
By the way, Greg, this is still recording. Yes. So if you need me to take this out of the recording, I will do.
Yeah, we can showing me stuff. Move to virtual bar any point.
No, there's nothing actually I did personal or something. So after I watched a video from Todd, I wanted him to write me something. If I can pass you something in return. Oh, sorry, this is maybe start too early. No. This is old stuff. Okay. I think. I'm just thinking. Yeah, this is something. Write me a script, and I wanted it to, wrap into XML. So that was the main goal, because I didn't know where I'm going with this. I know that FileMaker scripts are wrapped because when you copy it and paste and you manipulate with some tools, you can see how it's actually being stored inside of the FileMaker. So this is kind of like a tagging they are using. But I didn't know how to start it. So it produced, and I didn't know what to do with it. I tried to paste it into FileMaker. Then I've seen that Todd actually used a clipper. I said, hold on. Years ago, I used FileMaker clippers or something. So I did this, and then I provided it with the formatting, anything. I just literally took my script from FileMaker, pasted into Clipper, exported it into my clipboard, and pasted it here. I'm not sure if any one of you have used any Clipper or something. It just allows you to transform, because normally you cannot paste anything from a FileMaker into text file. That's the whole purpose of it. So eventually, I managed for it to write me a simple script with 2 lines. Like I'm not sure what it does here. Show custom dialog and receive input, something like that. Take variable. Yeah, get script parameter. So this is two lines of a script, and if you copy it straight away here, take it to the clip. You've got your tools. That's how easy it is. So really recommend play. And even I'm not paying for this tool yet. I'm just still on my experiment mode stage. So yeah, this is it. That was my tech talk.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you for sharing.
Thank
you.
Stop share. There's a little red bar that comes up in there. There's a little red bar. That's it. Cool, you found it.
I'm using Zoom.
Always hide that. Yeah, Zoom always hide
I'm not using Zoom on a regular basis, so I apologize for that.
That's fine, mate.
That's right. Just goes to show what you said, really, John. Someone else will do it as soon as possible.
Yeah, Absolutely.
Yeah, the other thing you can do there on the other side of it is that generating scripts will work quite well like that. A .fmp, actually, the second last one, not the last one, I sort of demoed using OpenAI to generate database schema, sort of asking it to generate the schema for a contacts database. And the first version I did was to generate the XML snippet format and then paste it in, and that worked. But then what I did was I just basically fed that into something that then called the OData interface and just stuck it in that way. So that bypassed the clipboard altogether. Now you can't do that with scripts, obviously, but for database schema you can. So you can generate database schema and modify it through OpenAI to OData. That works quite nicely.
Very cool.
Cool.
I guess that's the point to switch to the virtual bar, don't you, Gary?
Yeah, definitely. So I want to thank everyone that spoke, because great presentations. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I was
really good
saying.
session.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you, everyone.